In 1966, an ordinary commuter rail car strapped with two fighter jet engines screamed down a track in Ohio at 183 miles per hour, faster than any train in America before or since. And what did they do with it afterward? Ripped the jets off, threw it back into regular service, and eventually scrapped it for parts. That machine should have changed everything. It changed nothing, and it's not the only one. Here are 10 lost locomotives that were decades ahead of their time. Number 10. The British Rail APT. In the early 1980s, British Rail unveiled something that should have made the United Kingdom the undisputed leader in high-speed rail. Instead, it became one of the most painful engineering embarrassments in British transport history. The Advanced Passenger Train, or APT, was a revolutionary tilting train developed by British Rail's research division starting in the late 1960s. The concept was brilliant. Rather than building expensive new straight tracks for high-speed running, the APT would tilt its body into curves, allowing it to maintain high speeds on Britain's existing winding Victorian-era rail network. The train used an active hydraulic tilting system that could lean the carriages up to 9 degrees into a curve, a technology no other railway in the world had successfully deployed at the time. An experimental gas turbine version, the APTE, ran successful tests in 1972, reaching 152 miles per hour. This led to the development of the electric APTP prototype, designed for the busy West Coast main line between London, Euston, and Glasgow. The APTP was designed to make that journey in just 4 hours and 15 minutes, dramatically faster than the existing service. On December 7, 1981, the APTP entered limited public service, and almost immediately everything went wrong. The tilting mechanism malfunctioned in the cold winter weather, causing some passengers to experience motion sickness. The British press, already skeptical, tore the train apart. Headlines mocked it as a failure. British Rail, stung by the negative coverage, pulled the APT from service after just a few days. The tragedy is that the engineering problems were fixable. The tilting system needed refinement, not abandonment. But British Rail lost its nerve. The APT program was officially cancelled in 1986. The technology and research were then licensed to the Italian company Fiat Ferroviaria, which used them to develop the Pendolino tilting train. Today, Pendolino trains operate successfully across Italy, the United Kingdom, Finland, Poland, China, and other countries worldwide. The very technology that Britain abandoned came back to run on British tracks, built by an Italian company based on British research. Every Pendolino train running anywhere in the world today is a direct descendant of the APT. Britain invented the future of tilting rail travel and then gave it away. Number 9. The Soviet TEP80. Behind the Iron Curtain, Soviet engineers were quietly building something extraordinary. A diesel locomotive so fast it would set a world record that still stands to this day. The TEP80 was a passenger diesel locomotive built in 1988 at the legendary Kolomna Locomotive Works, one of Russia's oldest and most prestigious locomotive factories. It was designed as the next generation of Soviet mainline passenger power, intended to replace the aging TEP70 fleet on long-distance express routes across the vast Soviet railway network. Only a single prototype was constructed. The TEP80 was powered by a massive 6,000 horsepower diesel engine driving an alternating current transmission system, a setup that was cutting edge for diesel traction in the late 1980s. The locomotive featured a striking, angular body design that looked more like something from a future decade than from the era of Gorbachev and Perestroika. On October 5, 1993, the TEP80 made history. On a test run along a stretch of the Oktyabrskaya Railway between St. Petersburg and Moscow, it reached a speed of 271 kilometers per hour. That's 168 miles per hour. This made it the fastest diesel-powered locomotive ever recorded anywhere in the world. That record has never been broken. More than 30 years later, no diesel locomotive on Earth has gone faster. But by 1993, the Soviet Union no longer existed. It had dissolved in December 1991, and the Russian economy was in free fall. There was no money for new locomotive programs. There was no political will to invest in advanced rail technology. Russian Railways was struggling to maintain its existing fleet, let alone commission a brand new class of high-speed diesel locomotives. The TEP80 never entered series production. Not a single additional unit was ever ordered. The lone prototype was eventually placed on static display at the Novosibirsk Railway Museum in Siberia, where it sits today. The fastest diesel locomotive ever built, frozen in time, a relic of a country that no longer exists. Number 8. The Bugatti Autorail. Most people know the name Bugatti from impossibly expensive sports cars. Almost nobody knows that Ettore Bugatti once tried to reinvent the train. In the early 1930s, Bugatti found himself with a problem. His enormous Type 41 Royale luxury car had been a commercial failure, leaving him with a stockpile of massive, beautifully engineered straight-8 engines and no cars to put them in. So he did what only Bugatti would do. He put them on rails. The result was the Autorail Bugatti, first running in 1933. Each railcar was powered by multiple Royale engines, typically 2 or 4 of them, buried beneath a sleek, riveted aluminum body. The driver sat in a small glass cupola raised above the center of the roof, like a conning tower, giving him a clear view forward and back. It looked like nothing else on any railway in the world. Low, fast, and unmistakably Art Deco. And it was quick. On a test run, a Bugatti railcar reportedly reached around 122 miles per hour, roughly 196 kilometers per hour, at a time when most of the world's passenger trains were still plodding along at half that speed. The French railways put around 80 of them into service in various configurations, from single cars to multi-section présidentielle sets. But the Bugatti railcars were exotic, non-standard machines in a world that was rapidly standardizing. They were thirsty, complex, and built around car engines that nobody else used. After the Second World War, they were gradually worn out and withdrawn, and most were quietly scrapped through the 1950s and into the 1960s. A single preserved example survives today at the Cité du Train Museum in Mulhouse, France. A man famous for building the world's most beautiful cars briefly showed the railways what speed and style could look like. The railways admired it, used it up, and then went back to building ordinary trains. Number 7. The New York Central Dreyfuss Hudson. If the Pennsylvania Railroad had Raymond Loewy, its great rival, the New York Central, had Henry Dreyfuss. And in 1938, Dreyfuss created what many still consider the single most beautiful steam locomotive America ever produced. Not one of them survives. The New York Central's flagship train was the 20th Century Limited, the most prestigious passenger run in the country, connecting New York and Chicago. To re-equip it in 1938, the railroad hired industrial designer Henry Dreyfuss to restyle 10 of its J3A Hudson locomotives, the elegant 464 express engines that already hauled the train. What Dreyfuss did was extraordinary in its restraint. Instead of a bulbous cartoon of a streamliner, he wrapped the Hudson in a smooth gunmetal gray shroud with a single fin running along the top of the boiler and a clean bullet-shaped nose. A thin band of stainless steel traced the flanks. It was understated, fast-looking, and effortlessly modern. Paired with the matching cars of the century, it became one of the defining images of American luxury travel. These were genuinely fast machines too. Hudsons routinely ran at 80 to 100 miles per hour across the Central's famous water-level route along the Hudson River and the Great Lakes. For a few short years, the Dreyfuss Hudson was the face of the most glamorous train in the United States. But streamlined steam had a cruelly brief moment in the spotlight. By the late 1940s, the New York Central was buying diesels by the hundreds. The graceful shrouds were stripped off, and the J3A Hudsons were demoted, then withdrawn, then cut up for scrap in the early to mid-1950s. Every last one of the Dreyfuss Hudsons was destroyed. Not a single example was preserved. The most beautiful steam locomotive America ever built now exists only in photographs and a handful of grainy films, a ghost in gunmetal gray. Number 6. The GM Aerotrain, 1955. General Motors' Electromotive division was the undisputed king of diesel locomotives by the mid-1950s. So when GM decided to reinvent the American passenger train, the industry paid attention. The Aerotrain, introduced in 1955, was GM's vision of affordable, lightweight, modern rail travel. 2 prototypes were built. Each featured a streamlined LWT-12 locomotive with a body styled to look like a GM automobile, pulling a consist of modified GM bus bodies mounted on rail trucks. The idea was to slash the cost of passenger rail by using mass-produced highway vehicle components. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it was a disaster of ride quality. The lightweight bus-derived coaches rode terribly on rail. Passengers complained of excessive swaying, bouncing, and general discomfort. The Union Pacific tested one set and rejected it. The Pennsylvania Railroad tried the other and reached the same conclusion. The Rock Island Railroad eventually operated both sets on the Chicago to Peoria route, but even they gave up after a few years. The Aerotrain concept, lightweight, affordable, modular passenger trains, was genuinely forward-thinking. Modern railcar designs around the world use similar principles today, just executed with proper rail engineering rather than repurposed bus parts. GM had the right idea packaged in the wrong engineering. One Aerotrain set survives at the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The other is at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. They're reminders that innovation without proper execution is just a really uncomfortable ride. Number 5, the Union Pacific Big Blow Gas Turbine. While other railroads experimented with steam turbines, the Union Pacific went somewhere stranger and louder. It built locomotives powered by jet engine technology, and for a brief period, they were the most powerful locomotives on the planet. The Union Pacific had a unique problem: enormous freight tonnages hauled over vast distances across Wyoming and the Mountain West. It needed raw, sustained horsepower. So through the 1950s, the UP committed to gas turbine electric locomotives, or GTLs, machines that burned fuel in a turbine, much like a jet engine, to spin a generator that drove electric traction motors. The ultimate expression of this idea arrived in 1958, the third-generation turbines nicknamed the Big Blow for the deafening, howling roar they made. Built as two-unit machines with a separate fuel tender, each one was rated at around 8,500 horsepower, making them the most powerful single locomotives in regular service anywhere in the world. They burned cheap, heavy bunker C fuel oil, so thick it had to be heated just to flow through the pipes. For a while they were magnificent. They dragged mile-long freights over the mountains and screamed across the high desert. But the economics quietly turned against them. The cheap, heavy fuel they relied on became valuable to the petrochemical industry, and prices climbed. The turbines guzzled fuel even while sitting still, and they were complex to maintain. Meanwhile, ordinary diesel locomotives kept getting better and could simply be coupled together to match the power. By 1970, the entire fleet had been retired and almost all of them were scrapped. Two examples were spared and survive in museums, one at the Illinois Railway Museum and another in Ogden, Utah. For one remarkable decade, America operated the most powerful turbines on Earth. Then it decided they weren't worth the noise and let the technology disappear. Number 4. The Krauss-Maffei ML4000 diesel hydraulics. By the 1960s, American railroads had settled firmly on one way to build a diesel: the diesel electric, where the engine generates electricity to drive the motors. But across the Atlantic, West Germany had perfected a completely different approach, and two American railroads decided to import it and see if it was better. The German method was diesel hydraulic transmission, using fluid torque converters instead of electrical generators and traction motors. In theory, it was lighter, simpler, and gave an outstanding power-to-weight ratio, exactly what you'd want for clawing heavy trains up steep mountain grades. In 1961, the Southern Pacific and the Denver and Rio Grande Western both ordered ML4000 locomotives from Krauss-Maffei of Munich, one of Germany's great locomotive builders. Each unit produced roughly 4,000 horsepower from a pair of high-revving Maybach engines, packaged in a distinctly European-looking car body. They were brought in specifically to conquer the brutal mountain railroading of the American West. On paper, they were brilliant. In practice, they ran headlong into reality. The sophisticated hydraulic transmissions designed for German conditions struggled with the dust, heat, and relentless heavy lugging of American mainlines. Spare parts had to come from Germany. American mechanics had no experience with the technology and no easy way to fix it. Reliability suffered, and the locomotives spent too much time out of service. The Southern Pacific persevered longer than most, even buying additional batches, but the experiment was effectively over by the late 1960s. The diesel hydraulics were retired and scrapped, and the concept never took hold in North America. None of the original Krauss-Maffei units survived. It was a case of a genuinely superior idea defeated not by bad engineering, but by distance, logistics, and the sheer punishing scale of American railroading. Sometimes the better technology loses simply because it's a stranger in a foreign land. Number 3, the Bulleid Leader. This might be the strangest steam locomotive ever seriously attempted. A machine that tried to be a diesel before the diesel had truly arrived, and very nearly cooked its own crew alive in the process. The mastermind was Oliver Bulleid, the brilliant and famously unconventional chief engineer of Britain's Southern Railway. Bulleid looked at the coming age of diesel and electric traction and asked a radical question: why couldn't a steam locomotive offer the same conveniences? A cab at both ends, so it never needed turning, a smooth enclosed body, power distributed across bogies like a diesel. So in 1949, he built the Leader. It was unlike any steam locomotive before it. The Leader rode on two six-wheeled power bogies, with a fully enclosed, slab-sided body and a driving cab at each end. It used complex sleeve valves rather than conventional ones. In concept, it was genuinely decades ahead of its time, anticipating the layout of the diesel and electric locomotives that would soon take over the world's railways. Number 2, the Schienenzeppelin. This is where things get truly wild. In 1931, German engineer Franz Krukenberg built something that looked less like a train and more like a zeppelin on rails. The Schienenzeppelin, or rail zeppelin, was a lightweight, aerodynamic rail car, powered by a massive aircraft propeller mounted at the rear. The vehicle was constructed with a lightweight aluminum frame, weighed only about 20 tons, and seated approximately 40 passengers. Its BMW aircraft engine drove a four-bladed wooden propeller that pushed the railcar forward along the tracks. On June 25, 1931, the Schienenzeppelin set a world rail speed record of 230.2 kilometers per hour. That's 143 miles per hour. This record stood for over 2 decades, not being broken until 1954 by a French electric locomotive. Think about that. In 1931, this propeller-driven railcar was running at speeds that most countries' passenger trains wouldn't match for another 70 or 80 years. But the Schienenzeppelin had obvious problems. The giant propeller at the back was a safety nightmare. It was loud, it was dangerous to anyone on a platform, and it couldn't operate in reverse without modifications. The single-car design also limited its passenger capacity. Krukenberg proposed modifications, including replacing the propeller with a conventional powertrain, but funding and political interest dried up. In 1939, the Schienenzeppelin was dismantled and scrapped, reportedly so its aluminum could be used for the German war effort. A machine that held the world speed record for 23 years was taken apart and melted down. If that doesn't define lost locomotive, nothing does. Number 1. The M-497 Black Beetle. In 1966, the New York Central Railroad was desperate. Passenger numbers were falling. Airlines and interstate highways were stealing their customers. The railroad needed to prove that trains could be fast, modern, and competitive, and they needed to do it cheaply. Enter Don Wetzel, an engineer at New York Central, who came up with an idea so absurd it bordered on genius. He took a standard Bud rail diesel car, a boxy, unremarkable commuter rail car, and bolted 2 General Electric J47-19 jet engines on top of it. These were surplus military engines, originally designed for the Convair B-36 Peacemaker strategic bomber. The modified railcar was designated the M-497 and nicknamed the Black Beetle because of the jet black paint applied to its hastily constructed aerodynamic front fairing. On July 23, 1966, on a stretch of straight, flat track between Butler, Indiana and Stryker, Ohio, the Black Beetle roared down the rails at 183.68 miles per hour, roughly 295.6 kilometers per hour. That speed record, set in 1966, still stands as the fastest a rail vehicle has ever traveled on conventional track in the United States. Almost 60 years later, no American train has gone faster on standard rails. The test cost the New York Central approximately $50,000, a fraction of what a proper high-speed rail development program would have cost. It proved conclusively that existing American rail infrastructure could support high-speed travel with relatively minor modifications. If you found this journey through railway history fascinating, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Drop a comment telling us which of these lost locomotives you think deserved a second chance. And if you think the Black Beetle's record should finally be broken, let us know. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.